Clean Water Wednesday continues here on the Big Show. Bob Quinn, and we are talking about some practices being put in place to kind of keep Rathbun Lake a little bit cleaner, and that's the whole object. If clean water starts here, clean water in Iowa starts here. Doesn't matter where here is, because wherever you're at is where clean water in Iowa starts. We're in a middle of a bean field right now, and clean water in Iowa definitely starts here. And a big thank you to Dan Lovett, our landowner, for showing us around today. One of the guys doing the work on it, though, is Brian DeMoss. He is the environmental specialist, Lucas County Soil and Water Conservation District. Brian, kind of describe the project for me a little bit, and then we'll get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what we expect to see out of it.
Well, I think Dan and I got started on this project probably over 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we're just waiting on funding to come along for the terraces. We started the terraces last fall, got all the tile and the intakes put in, but due to weather it shut us down, so we finished up the terraces this past spring. Then Dan approached me and talked about doing a pond, which I knew this ditch was an active ditch. Every trip coming through it was an active goalie, high sediment loads, and plus it was about 90% crop ground coming to it, and that's the type of stuff that we target. So
yeah,
kind of a deal on the structure, but we lined up the money because it's a good place for a pond.
Okay, tell me about funding, what might be available for landowners out there, and what you guys have available.
I think on the pond we used some REAP dollars and WSPF, and same goes for, if my mind is correct, I think the terraces was all funded through WSPF, maybe a piggyback of REAP as well.
Now, you mentioned an active ditch. Help me out here. What's an active ditch? How do we know if we have an active ditch on a farm?
There's a lot of telltale signs, bare raw banks, sloughing, roots, balls coming off the sides, yeah. And you can tell from year to year how quick it's moving. This one is a fast mover.
Now, we talk about clean water in Iowa starts here. We're standing in the middle of a project that we know is going to be a big pond. You've got some terraces around that. So what are we hoping to have as our end goal here as far as stopping erosion and maybe phosphorus, things like that?
We always look for the biggest bang of our buck, and we want to stop every head cut coming up from this ditch, because they will keep unraveling throughout the landscape. So our end goal here, our calculations, we're treating, terrace is treating 119 tons per year of sediment, and the pond is approximately 280 tons a year.
And how many acres do you suppose we're draining here?
Total of terraces are treating 45 acres, and the pond 60.
So as far as where this water ends up, kind of trace it from where I'm standing right now. Where does this water end up? And I'm guessing somewhere along the line it's going to end up in Lake Rathbun.
It all ends up in Lake Rathbun.
Yeah. So this is kind of a big deal. How far are we away from Lake Rathbun?
Oh, we're probably a good 30 or 40 minutes away from the headwater, or the tailwaters of the lake.
So, when we talk about a drainage area, and we've talked about this a lot of the Big Show, these drainage areas are huge. And, you may not think you're having an impact on folks who are drawing water out, maybe, like you say, 30, 40 miles away out of a lake. And this water that comes out of the lake goes all the way down into northern Missouri. So there's a lot of folks, there's 80,000 people or so that depend on this fella up here, making sure that lake is clean. So when we talk about, clean water in Iowa starts here, it truly does start here. What else are you guys doing here? What else can you tell me about this, the conservation practices here?
Well, we haven't done them yet. Like, we need to put a seating on the pond, which Dan has that all lined up, and he's also looking at doing a little bit of CRP, maybe buff strips on there too, to kind of get his wildlife bird numbers back up, because I know he likes to shoot a few birds once in a while. So,
attaboy. Hey, thanks so much for talking to us a little bit on the Big Show. Clean Water in Iowa starts here, and we're with the folks today with the Rathbun Lake watershed area. Bob Quinn here on the Big Show. Hey, Clean Water Wednesday continues here on the Big Show. Big thank you to the folks from Rathbun Lake Watershed hosting us today, and also to Dan Lovett, who is our landowner out here. I'm here with Velvet Buckingham. Velvet is the environmental specialist, Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. Velvet's joined us on the Big Show in the past. You've done some work in the area. Kind of give me an overview of some of the projects that's going on here in this Rathbun watershed.
Well, thankfully the project started back in 2004. We've done the slugger projects. We generally look at structural practices, so a lot of terraces, a lot of water and sediment basins, a lot of structures, great stabilization structures like Dan's done here. We've built over 2 million feet of terraces in the watershed, hundreds of ponds. Thankfully, we've got landowners like Dan in the watershed that are very willing to work with us. We
You know, you mentioned something there, and it's curious because I've had a chance to travel around the state of Iowa, and people will ask me, how do they get those people to get on board with that? How do they get them to cooperate and do these kinds of things? Because they're great projects. So I'll ask you, when you go out and talk to folks here in the watershed, what do you talk to them about? How do you kind of convince them this is a big deal?
Here in the watershed, I think we're fortunate because a lot of the landowners see the problems on their farm, and they don't like to have problems on their farm. No landowner likes to see soil loss or a ditch or a little gully or anything on their land. So I think the landowners here recognize that. They want to protect their land because unfortunately the good black dirt here in southern Iowa is not feet deep. Some spots it's only a couple inches, and we got clay underneath of it. So
Yeah, tell me about that.
They've got to do their job to protect it and keep that good soil on their land. It also helps because we're able to get some special funding. We've got some great partners, Iowa DNR, Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Those agencies are able to come to us as watershed projects and help us give landowners a little bit higher cost share percentage rates, sometimes as much as 75% cost share. So obviously that helps that landowner's dollars go further to protect more of their land because they're not having to put in so much funding to treat their farm.
You know, one of the things that I marvel about here, and you're talking about landowners, and a lot of times landowners and people working that land are not the same person. And so, you know, you've got to go back to that landowner to do these things, and sometimes it's kind of a tough sell.
Absolutely. We run into those circumstances where maybe that's an absentee landowner that's maybe just out of county or maybe even out of state. But generally, we've had good success. We continue to keep contacting them. A lot of times we can work through their operator because that operator, of course, is the one that's on the ground all the time, and they see those problem areas that maybe need fixed. And we've been fortunate here that generally we have good success. I mean, we're close to 75%, 70% participation rate here in the watershed. So we're blessed. I know not the whole state's not that way, but thankfully here in the southern part of Iowa, here in the Rathbun watershed, we've been very fortunate.
Velva, thanks so much for joining us today. Bob Quinn here on The Big Show.